Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by Nebula. Okay, so I'm just gonna jump straight into this because there's been something about the way Seinfeld has been discussed these past, 20 plus years or so, that has always bugged me. And it's that the conventional wisdom around the show seems to go something like this. The first couple of seasons are the very low concept ones, where you see the sitcom grow into itself. The middle seasons are the golden years, the ones that made it a cultural phenomenon and clearly the height of the show. Then Larry David quit Seinfeld after season 7, leaving the last 2 seasons to increasingly fall into a spiral of cartoonish nonsense without his grounding instincts. The show became a slight parody of itself, much like fellow NBC sitcoms The Office and Friends eventually did, before ending with a divisive, maybe even terrible finale. Okay, especially as the years have gone on, this seems to have cemented itself as the opinion I see most about the show's later legacy. And I've always had it in the back of my head to make this video because the fact is, I could not disagree more. Not only do I think the last 2 seasons, especially season 8, are some of the show's strongest, I think they stand out as some of the best absurdist comedy ever aired on the big 3 networks. Right up there with the show that inspired the Naked Gun films, Police Squad, the late golden era days of The Simpsons, and the heights of Community Season 3. I love the later years of Seinfeld, and I am so sick of people who dismiss them. In this video, I want to talk about it.
Certainly. May I ask why?
First bite?
I should probably start with the criticism that gets applied most to these seasons, which is that they're far more cartoonish, which is 100% true. The situations the characters find themselves in during these years are often more over the top and heightened than any year prior. Something like the bookstore, where Jerry discovers that his elderly parents and uncle, and really all old people, are constantly shoplifting in a plot that heavily riffs on Martin Scorsese's Cape Fear, probably would have felt out of place in season 3, and feels like a different show entirely from seasons 1 or 2. And to that I say, good. This was not some out of left field turn for Seinfeld. It's the natural trajectory the show has been on since the very beginning. Going from the first episode, which opens on the guys debating the placement of the buttons on George's shirt, to a show where Kramer could spend an episode under arrest for being a suspected serial killer by the end of season 4. This ramping up of the ridiculousness had always been built into the show's DNA, and for the most part, I think they handled this really well. And there's tons of things to recommend about both ends of this grounded versus cartoonish spectrum. And though it definitely did change, this evolution happened really gradually, and I don't think it ever felt unnatural. Let's compare a great episode from season 2, the classic The Chinese Restaurant, with one of my favorites from season 9, The Dealership. I picked these two because I think they go a long way to highlight what changed and what didn't. Both episodes take place with the characters mostly stuck in one mundane location, a restaurant and a car dealership, and both play off the relatable everyday annoyances that kind of come with these places, whether it's waiting for a table to open up with the sneaking suspicion that you may not be high on the host's priority list, to the feeling that car salesmen just aren't being honest with you. Both even feature a George subplot that sees him become increasingly angry and anxious over a relatively minor thing, becoming furious at the vending machine for ripping him off, and impatiently waiting for the restaurant phone to open up. Both of which he argues with complete strangers about. You have all these elements that make them both feel inherently Seinfeld through and through, but the big differences between these two are just as notable. First, there's a simple fact that I'm sure any season 9 hater would be happy to bring up. There's just no getting around the fact that the setup for the dealership is far more contrived than that of the Chinese restaurant. The latter is about a group of friends deciding to go to a restaurant without reservations and being in for a longer wait than they expected. And though George's struggles to use their phone may feel baffling to viewers now, pretty much everything about this situation feels very grounded in everyday 90s reality. Meanwhile, the dealership is about a man in his early 40s bringing his very maladjusted friends to go car shopping with him in the middle of a workday because apparently no one had anything else better to do, and Elaine is dating Putty, the salesman. It's not like it's a really out there contrivance or anything, but it's obviously less concerned with resembling everyday life than it is with putting the cast in situations where they can shine. But here's the thing, they do shine. The Seinfeld cast, well, aside from maybe Jerry himself, who improves as the show goes on but was never a top tier performer, are all excellent. And I would say they are at their peak in the later seasons, as they're called upon to dig even deeper into the stranger and ever more specific quirks and neuroses of these characters. Kramer and the car salesman making a joint pact to keep the test drive going until the car fully runs out of gas, just to see how low they can get the meter to go, is not something you'd see in season 2. It isn't grounded, but it's also one of the best Kramer stories in the show's history and feels completely in line with the more heightened take on the character that has been built up and expanded upon for years. And though I understand preferring those seasons, I think this mode of Seinfeld works just as well. It lets a talented performer like Michael Richards go absolutely nuts, and he kills it. I see no reason to dismiss that just because it isn't grounded in the same level of reality as those early years, which was something the middle seasons had already started to let go of more and more. Do the Seinfeld characters become more absurd as time goes on? Absolutely. But I think the temptation to call that Flanderization and just end it at that is a very lazy one. We see that term, which refers to one aspect of a character coming to dominate their entire personality, used a lot in reference to aging sitcoms. And I think it has some merit when it comes to both Friends and The Office, but that's probably a topic for another video. With Seinfeld, I just don't see it. There's nothing lazy about the way these characters are written in the later years. I'd compare it more to something like seasons 7 through 12-ish of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, a show Seinfeld is often compared to, where yes, the cast become more ridiculous, but that's because the writers are showing a willingness to dig deeper into the odder aspects of their cast and continuously push the envelope in terms of what they'll allow these characters to do. It's honing in on the characters' strengths, not reducing them down to something lesser. I think people forget just how many defining Seinfeld moments come from these last 2 seasons. Elaine's little kicks dance, George's Festivus backstory, Frank Costanza screaming "Serenity now" to stay calm. All those episodes are fantastic, and I really can't imagine these characters without them. And just in general, I feel like people forget how much of Seinfeld's lasting legacy is packed into those later years. As if those weren't enough, you also have No Soup for You, Yada Yada Yada, and even The Jerk Store Called, all coming from these last 2 seasons. And the thing is, every one of those phrases and moments deserved to catch on because they were attached to genuinely great episodes. As Seinfeld went on, it became less realistic and more of a showcase for very funny scripts with their own internal absurdist logic. Like George dedicating his life to saving his arcade high score in Frogger. Was that grounded? No, but that didn't mean it didn't pull off the cartoonish extremely well, or that it didn't give Jason Alexander some of his best moments in the show's run. It remained an ever-evolving, tightly scripted joke machine until the very end. And unlike Friends, where you could maybe accuse the show of losing a certain amount of heart and warmth as its characters grew more absurd, Seinfeld had no heart to lose. The no hugging, no learning rule for the show was built into the premise from the very start. It was always about putting these characters into situations where they feel compelled to either bulldoze through social norms and niceties, or deal with an external character doing the same to them. Those situations just happened to grow more extreme as the show went on, often to fantastic results. One moment I love from the finale is when the gang thinks their plane is going to crash, and for a moment it looks like Elaine is about to confess her love for Jerry, leading the audience to think that maybe this is when the show will finally invest in some sort of real love story with the cast. But no, the plane straightens out and she drops it, and the rest of the episode is a cruel joke at the character's expense. Seinfeld staunchly refused to be sentimental ever, and I think that helped support the absurdism even more in those later years. Now, are these seasons flawless? No, I think if I had to point towards the biggest weakness, it's sadly that the last 3 or 4 episodes of season 9 just aren't up to par. And while I love a lot about the series finale, and I think the general concept of it is really funny and bold, the courtroom stuff veers into clip show territory in a way that's especially unsatisfying on rewatch. But overall, I'm happy to stack seasons 8 and 9 against the best of Seinfeld. And for me personally, I prefer them to the first 2 seasons. Yeah, that version of the show was a better, more realistic take on the lives of aimless New York 30-somethings in the 90s, but the later seasons, with their heightened characters and circular plots that build to often bizarre crescendos, just feel a lot more unique to me. One thing I like about fans of The Simpsons is they often see that show, the first 10 to 12 seasons at least, in very distinct eras. Some of them more absurd than others, some of them more grounded or heartfelt than others, and you can have your favorites while finding a lot of value and quality in all of them. And that's how I hope Seinfeld's later years can eventually be remembered as. Not as an example of Seinfeld in decline, but as a great and distinct era of the show unto itself, giving us some of the best material that the main cast ever got to play with, while making plenty of room for recurring players to bring their A-game more than ever before. If you're a fan and haven't watched the show in a while, maybe give seasons 8 and 9 another look. You might be surprised by how many of your favorite scenes and episodes come from this era of Seinfeld. You know what show's also in season 9 and stronger than ever? Jet Lag, the hit travel competition show that is currently killing it on Nebula. It's one of Nebula's biggest shows for a reason. If you like reality competition stuff, even a little bit, I think it's worth your time. And it has a really enjoyable personal touch that most of those lack. You can watch the current season and the entire back catalog on Nebula. And while you're there, you can catch up with great creators like Lindsay Ellis, who uploads exclusive videos, along with Nando V Movies, Wendover Productions, Be Kind Rewind, Patrick H. Willems, and I'm on there too, and my videos are always ad-free. Plus, right now you can get a lifetime subscription for only $300. That's right, lifetime. There's zero catch there. I think that's the kind of offer that really sets Nebula apart, and of course you can also get Nebula for 40% off an annual plan, basically just over $250 a month. There's no wrong answer here, so go check out that link down in the description and start watching all my videos ad-free on Nebula.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.